office. Now, let me introduce the speaker of today's webinar, Martin Graham. Martin is chairman of our multifamily office Oracle Capital Group. And before joining our company, Martin was director of markets and chairman of AIM at London Stock Exchange. He has also been appointed to a number of boards, including the Moscow Stock Exchange, where he is also a member of the Strategy Committee and chairman of the Risk Management Commission. So now I'd like to pass the word to Martin himself, and we kick off our webinar.
Morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be presenting this webinar to you this morning, and thank you very much for your interest. Today I wanted to cover 4 topics. The first topic is the changing landscape of the wealth management market and the reasons behind why we're seeing so much consolidation and integration going on. Secondly is the key bit of today is really focusing on what clients need. And when I talk about clients, I'm talking about high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals. And their needs are certainly way beyond just asset management. In the third section, I'm going to go into more detail about a key client need, and that need is how to protect and grow wealth. And in the final section, I'm going to look to the future, look at how the industry needs to evolve its service offering in response to quite radically changing client demands. As I say, at the end of each section, I will take questions. I'll also take questions. I'll also leave time for questions at the end. If we don't have time to answer all the questions, we'll answer them by email after today. So thanks again. So I apologize for the simplicity of this slide, but it illustrates the key players in the wealth management industry today. A large part of the wealth management industry is private banks who provide an excellent service in what they do, but their focus is fairly narrow, and in some cases it can be characterized as being fairly product-led. Single-family offices on the right-hand side are very dedicated to their clients. They tend to be populated by a small number of people. They provide a limited number of services, focusing on things like asset management and concierge services, and they outsource a huge amount of what they do. So in terms of client service, they tend to receive a fairly disjointed offering. The third tier, the multifamily offices, are a very client-focused group of businesses. They provide a far wider range of services to clients, some of which are outsourced, but increasingly there are good examples of companies where most of the provision is done in-house. So that's how the market looks. Recently within the market we've seen a growing trend to consolidation. We've seen Credit Suisse buy Morgan Stanley's European and Middle East wealth management businesses. We've seen Schroders acquiring Cazenove Capital. We've seen Credit Suisse agreeing to sell J.O. Hambro Investment Management to Bermuda National Limited. Now that's really a reflection of the need to provide a far wider range of services to clients to drive more efficiency through the delivery model, through creating economies of scale, and also it's a response to ever-increasing regulatory burdens. And we think, and certainly experts like PwC think, that this consolidation trend will continue as we're getting more and more pressure on margins in the industry and the growing regulatory burden I referred to earlier. Now, I did want to talk about the pros and cons of M&A. M&A does create some very, very good things, okay, but in a lot of cases it doesn't provide an outcome which is positive for clients. So on the plus side, merging businesses enables them to create critical mass. It enables them to respond to growing regulatory burdens. It creates more scale. However, and I speak from a lot of experience as being a banker in the past and being number 2 at the London Stock Exchange and being very involved in doing different corporate deals, larger organisations tend to become far more bureaucratic and far less client-focused. It's incredibly hard to put 2 often very distinctive cultures together, and you should also not underestimate the issues around systems integration. And the other thing is, during M&A type deals. It's just human nature to be internally focused rather than focusing on clients. So I would suggest personally that a model based on organic growth with a strong core culture actually gets to a superior outcome. It gets all the positives of scale, but without some of the drawbacks of M&A transactions. One interesting trend in the market is that a large number of wealthy individuals still manage their own wealth. And what we're seeing in Asia is typical across the world. Here we see 70% of high net worth individuals in Asia managing their own investments. Now I think that shows two things. One is that there is a significant opportunity for the wealth management industry, but it also begs what I think is a key question. Why do so many people want to run their own money? And this quote from Scorpio Partnership, which is one of the leading consumer insight and strategy consultancy firms to the global wealth industry, I think says a lot. It basically illustrates the fact that the industry as a whole is not doing a good job. And the major reason behind that, and it's something I'm going to emphasize a lot this morning, is a lack of genuine client understanding. So a large opportunity exists in the market, but the wealth management industry as it currently operates is not necessarily in a position to exploit it. So that's really the first section, what the market looks like today. So I'd like to, and it creates the big picture, what the providers are doing, all the changes which have taken place. Now I'd be very happy to answer a few questions on that before I move on to the section on client needs. I've got one question here. I'll read out the questions and then I'll attempt to answer them in an elusive way. The first question is, do you see this market consolidation only in the private banking sector, or will the same thing happen amongst family offices? My view is it is inevitable that you'll see the same thing happening amongst family offices, because a lot of them are too small to provide a sufficient range of services which meet growing client demands. And when I go through the next section, which is around client demands, I think that will answer a lot of those questions. The second question I have is, how long will it take clients from emerging markets to accept the multi-family office concept? And I think the answer to that is they already accept it. And increasingly, I spend a lot of time traveling to Asia and other emerging markets in Eastern Europe, and multi-family offices are growing the whole time. So some people are very keen because they think for reasons of confidentiality to keep things in a single family office, but increasingly people are recognizing that a multi-family office can give a far wider range of services, a better service, and it can also have very high standards of confidentiality. So that concept is already being accepted on a growing basis in emerging markets. Okay, no more questions on section 1. I'm sure the next few sections will stimulate a lot more questions. So the second part of what I'm going to say today is the really important part, is taking a much closer look at client needs. Now, I apologize once again for the simplicity of this slide, but I think there are two basic approaches to servicing wealthy individuals, and the message we're getting at Oracle is very clear. There's a product-led approach, which is moving to fairly standardized products. That's driven by the companies that provide these things having to face rising costs and wanting to maintain their margins. Or there's a client-led approach. Now, Oracle's experience shows there's a huge preference from clients for a client-led approach, which is basically building on strong relationships and establishing a very sophisticated understanding of what clients really need. So the first thing I'd say in terms of what clients are saying to us what they need is a client-led approach is essential. the most successful industry participants, and this was a recent survey from Bloomberg Markets, the most successful ones tend to be client-led boutiques. They're not part of large banks. There's one exception here, HSBC, because they're able to provide very tailored services based on client understanding, not just selling product to clients. The next slide I think is very interesting. A lot of people just assume that catering for high net worth individuals is purely about asset management. When we talk to our clients, they clearly have a whole range of motivations and needs, and asset management is only one part of that. So this is by way of illustration that managing money, for instance, is for wealthy families is becoming less about asset management. It's more about making sure that future generations that inherit that wealth know how to keep growing it. So when we talk to our customers and we ask them to give us their 5 most important motivations behind using us, often asset management isn't very high up the list, which I think is quite interesting. But it really just illustrates the fact that clients require a very significant range of services. Parents, the wealthy individuals, are very concerned not just about handing wealth between generations efficiently, they're also concerned about the ability of their children, and often their children can be still seen as children well into their 40s by their parents. They're concerned about the ability of their children to actually handle that wealth properly. And that's a major concern of a lot of our clients. And I wanted to give you a couple of real-life examples of the kind of services that companies which aren't just looking to maximize profit at every available opportunity, but doing things which are important to respond to client demands, which don't necessarily just generate profit, do. So there are a couple of recent examples within our business. Okay, the first one was around one of our clients who wanted their child to actually really understand how the financial industry worked. And what we did was we provided an internship program for 6 months where they spent time working with us, with some of our clients, with some of our key suppliers, so they could get a very in-depth understanding of how the financial industry works, which is really important for their future and their family's future. Another client was very concerned that their family didn't really understand properly how money can be used in a positive sense. They were worried about their kids just spending money on luxury goods and not thinking about wider responsibilities. We'd actually set up a charitable foundation for this client, which is another thing that clients demand sometimes. And what we did was we arranged for the client, one of the client's sons, to work with the charitable foundation for a long time. And this foundation was investing funds into special medical equipment for hospitals in poor regions. And the son got involved in the process of procurement and visited all those hospitals, and it changed the way they looked at life completely. So they're really focused. This is just focusing on the fact that you can't just think about asset management alone. Customers are not just into a single service from providers. They want the whole range of services, and those services can be very, very wide actually. Now, just in terms of the range of services, beyond the ones I've already mentioned, we have a demand for clients to help with asset financing, so refinancing private jets and boats, finding mortgages, etc. We have a demand for specialist insurance services, which is really important to high net worth individuals. Specialist legal services, and that covers a wide range of things, from helping with immigration to helping with taxation to private debt financing to complex legal case management. We do concierge services for clients, so we get all sorts of requests, from getting tickets to watch Chelsea play, which obviously is a very important thing, to finding the best schools for children and making sure we've got the right food in the fridge when they turn up in London on a Friday night. We also provide very specialist property services, because sourcing properties in London is really important for clients, sourcing the right kind of properties. Not only do we source properties and find off-market properties, we actually develop our own properties. So the list of things clients need is endless, and I haven't mentioned here things like restructuring industrial assets, which we get involved in. So there's some corporate finance aspects that clients demand from us. So it's really by way of illustration that the client base that we serve is high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth individuals require a very significant range of services. So that's the end of section 2. In section 3 I'm going to go into more detail on a couple of very important things, as I mentioned, the need to preserve wealth and grow wealth and how we can actually help that occur. I've got one question already in the second section. Do I think a product-led approach is wrong? My view is a product-led approach is not necessarily always wrong, because often there can be a single product which a client might want, which can be very efficiently produced in a very standardized way. Okay, so a lot of people, that's their business model. In terms of providing what clients genuinely need and want, I think you need to be able to move away from a product-led approach. It has to be tailored to individual needs. And unless you've got a client-led approach and understand the client in a very, very sophisticated way, as I say, you're not going to understand their genuine needs. So a client-led approach, I think, is superior. It's got issues. It's not such an attractive economic model in a lot of cases. But in terms of catering for what the clients require, a client-led approach is infinitely superior. The next question is, how can you ensure that the business will be profitable if the client-led approach is used by the company? I think that's really a management challenge. I think you have to accept, if you're in a client-led business, it's going to be a lower margin business. It takes a lot more resource, but it's got a lot more stability in the long term because you create very deep relationships with your clients and great loyalty. So it's a lower risk, lower margin, more sustainable, higher growth business in my mind. Okay, the next question I have is, what are the most popular services that multifamily offices provide? And I'll just tell you from an Oracle Capital perspective. I mean, initially a lot of people come here and their first point of contact is, can we find the right property for them? So that's very, very popular, particularly because they're very, very specific product needs in terms of property from our clients. They're keen on visa support to begin with. Then they tend to move into how can we help them structure their assets, which I'm going to talk a lot about in the next section. A lot of people are interested in philanthropy and setting up charitable trusts. A lot of people want us to help them with their industrial assets. So what tends to happen in our business, I think, is when we're introduced to a client in one area of the business and a relationship is built, all the other areas, a lot of which I've already mentioned, come into play. And some of our clients actually come to us and say they want some help buying business in the UK. So increasingly our business is global. We're getting people from Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe who want to relocate to the UK and Europe, get involved, get their children into university, get involved in refocusing their businesses here. So we do source businesses of people, so it's more of a corporate finance service. Okay. Well, if there are any questions we've missed and we don't have time to answer, we will answer them by email after the session. Okay, so now I wanted to move on to onto the third section, which goes into a lot more detail about two critically important client priorities. Number one, growing wealth, and number two, protecting wealth. Now, I did say at the start that this business isn't just about asset management, and it's not always highest on the list of priorities, and you can't, to succeed in this business, you can't just do asset management. Some people are very, very specialists, can make good money doing that, but our view is clients require more. But asset management clearly is central to how you grow your wealth. Now, I just wanted to describe, this very important context here, a typical client that we see in Oracle Capital. A typical client of ours is someone who's work very hard, 24 hours a day in some cases, generating a lot of wealth in a particular business. Okay, they then crystallize some of that wealth. They've worked very, very hard making a success of their own business. They're very, very reluctant to risk losing all the money they've made. So even though they're interested in continuing to grow their wealth, they want to do it in a fairly conservative way and in a way where there's proper protection of wealth. So I think it's critical that we need to understand that we need to tailor services to a client's risk appetite. We need to understand risk-reward ratios. And a lot of people, in fact this goes for a lot of the financial industry, do not understand how to properly balance risks and rewards. Okay. Within asset management, what we see is demand for quite a few services. Firstly, increasingly people are looking at different asset classes, so they're looking at investing in physical assets like property. They're interested in traditional fund management, but that's only one small part of it. Most of our clients want a geographical diversity and asset class diversity. They're interested in holding a portfolio of private equity assets or doing co-invest, and they often want high yield from some of the investments they've got to generate cash. So it's diverse geographically in asset terms, and they want to have the right balance between risk and reward. I think it's very, very important. So to be good in this business, you need to provide a fairly exciting product range within asset management. You also need to be able to provide that service at a reasonable price. I'd be very keen to add. And you need to tailor what you're doing in asset management to client risk appetite. I did mention alternative investments is not just about property and gold and all those kind of things. People are looking away from traditional asset classes, so it's quite interesting that some of our clients are investing in fine wine, which is clearly a great play on the growing middle classes around the world and the growing demand for red wine. I make some wine in Italy, which I can sell to some of you if you like, but it might not be described as fine wine. So we need, as an industry, to provide an attractive range of investments to our clients to provide growth. So asset management is an important part of it. But as I said, clients are also very anxious to preserve their wealth. And they use the structures mentioned in this slide to make that happen. So they use fiduciary structures like family foundations to protect beneficiary ownership within the right jurisdiction. They tend to structure assets, and they need to update those structures on an ongoing basis. They have to ensure a very, very efficient choice of specialist service providers in some of these areas. So the ability to structure wealth in the most efficient way is becoming an increasingly important priority for our clients. There are a number of tools which can be utilized to enable the optimal structuring of wealth. And this is obviously a very, very complex and ever-evolving area. Utilizing fiduciary and corporate structures helps clients to preserve assets for the longer term, and it also enables them to retain flexibility, and when they need to meet changing needs in their families, it helps protect assets from political, social, economic, personal uncertainty. It helps them always maintain confidentiality, and also it helps to plan for and mitigate tax liabilities. So what we see is that trusts and private family foundations can be used for many purposes, and they provide a range of financial and other personal benefits. So those include things like asset protection. So once a client's assets have been transferred into a trust or a private family foundation, they're no longer held in that client's name. So while the client or the family still remain the beneficiary, they can be used to protect against a range of potential threats, like claims from creditors, ex-spouses, if you go through a tragic divorce, and other third parties. They can also help with succession planning, managing the transition of wealth between different generations. They can also help with improving the administration in a very efficient way, so you can see what your assets are rather than have them all over the place. As I said, they can help with tax planning, And as I already stressed, privacy is very important. They can help with that. Private trust companies are actually suitable for clients who want to maintain more control over the management of their trusts. So the principal objective of a private trust company is to serve as a trustee for a single family trust or related group of trusts. And unlike ordinary trust relationships, where assets are transferred to professional trustees, in a PTC, a private trust company, the assets are actually owned by the PTC structure itself. So decisions in relation to the trust management are not made by trustees but a board of directors. So if you set up a private trust company, you can have more control compared with traditional trust structures, certainly over the administration of the trust and the board's composition, without actually undermining the validity of the actual structure. You can have very efficient administration because you can have people on the board who can be family members, but also have a balance with professional advisors like accountants and other special experts. You can make decisions more quickly because those people are going to have a closer knowledge of the client's business and will be better informed about what kind of investments should be made. And it also gives some opportunities with more complex assets to execute fairly complicated business transactions. So I think I went into a lot of detail in those areas because there is an increasing demand from our clients to get this right. And to set up the right kind of trust structures, etc., you do need to outsource some of that service to some people with a huge amount of specialist expertise. The ultimate objective is to create a very efficient fiduciary structure, and that really has 4 elements to it. And this is really by way of summary. You need to make sure you have trustees who have got the right kind of credibility and right kind of quality. It's really important to choose the right jurisdiction that's got a proper international standing and reputation. There's a lot of bucket shop type countries trying to peddle their services, and I would urge that clients don't get involved in going to those jurisdictions because it might give you instant short-term gratification, but it creates problems in the future. It is critical to make sure that the trust and foundation documents are drafted properly, so having proper legal advice at an initial stage is really, really important. You need to take your time to get it right, because if you don't get it right, that stores up problems for the future. And structuring the underlying assets properly is also very important, because if you create the wrong kind of complexity in the short term, you're going to, as I say again, you're going to cause yourself problems in the future. And the other interesting thing about these kind of structures is not just protecting against external events. This is a quote from Barclays, which I think was quite amazing, that 40% of high net worth individuals have had personal experiences of family wealth leading to conflicts. Obviously, money does cause conflicts within families, okay, and structuring provides another useful outcome, which enables wealth to be not undermined in the event of significant family disputes. So it's something people need to bear in mind. Obviously it's a horrible worst case scenario, but families do fall out over money, and it's important to actually plan for that. Now, it's interesting to note that 82% of high net worth individuals have wills, and 52% have established trusts and or some kind of estate management structure. That's according to PNC Wealth Management magazine. That really illustrates the fact that, really illustrates what I've been talking about, that there is amongst our clients a growing realization of the importance of wealth protection. So I just emphasize again in this section, growing wealth is important, and most of our clients follow a fairly conservative approach, but based on diversity. And I'd say it's really important to invest in assets that you understand as an individual, rather than these. There are all loads of examples of something for nothing. People investing in things they don't really understand because the returns look spectacular. Those always end in tears. So investing in physical assets, having proper diversity, and And also having some protection against market risk is important with asset management. But then the other critical thing is how you protect your wealth. And using trust and other structures in a sensible way is very important. It takes time, it's complex. You need to go to experts, but it makes a huge difference. So that's my third section. So I'm happy to answer all sorts of questions on that before I go on to my final one about the future. The first question I have is, do your clients prefer more focus on growth or more focus on protection? The answer to that is, it's about balance. It's about the balance between risk and reward. People want growth, but they don't want to take unnecessary risks in getting that growth. And I chair a couple of board risk committees, so I've done a lot of academic study around risk, and it's incredible how few people in the financial industry understand risk properly, and clients don't understand risk properly. So we work very closely with our clients to actually explain what the risks in some of the investments are, the market risk, the wider risks. So people do want to grow their money, but they've already made their money. They're very, very anxious not to lose it. Okay, that's a critical point. So they want to grow it conservatively with proper protections put in place. So the two, it's just both sides of a coin. So it's not one or the other. It's about balance. I've also got a question, what other alternative investments can you recommend? I talked about the example of wine. I won't say racehorses. I like investing in racehorses, but that's not for money, it's for stupidity and fun. I do like a lot of physical assets. I think the commodity cycle's probably turned. There are some selected commodities I'd invest in, some of the rare earth minerals. I think they're still attractive. I still think property is a great asset in the right places. There are some markets which are overblown. But I think physical assets, and I stress things you understand are worth investing in. Wine is interesting. Some of the other things like whiskey and cognac can be quite interesting. And part of our wine fund is invested in those. So it's really a wide range of things, but I think just purely financial assets is a mistake. I think you need to think far more widely. But personally, I would just stress once again the point that our clients know just as much as we do about some of these things, so they are things you really understand where you should be focusing some of your investment. And another thing which I think is attractive, and all these things are plays on scarcity, okay, of rare commodities. Art. There will be a lot of money made in art if you can find some artists are very, very under-recognized, and as soon as there's a change in fashion, you can see 10 times increases on your investments. So I think art is another interesting area, but I would stress if you want to invest in art or wine, those kind of things, you need to do it through a fund. You need to use experts, because just buying one piece of art or one vintage of wine creates too much risk within a portfolio. You need to diversify your risk within those kind of asset classes. The next question is, do we use BVI and New Zealand structures for our high net worth individuals? The answer to that is yes. What is the most popular structure to protect clients' wealth these days? The fact is there's no fit for... So I'm not reading the question properly. There isn't a typical structure that all our clients use. It depends on where the clients are domiciled, what their residency status is, what assets they have, and where the actual beneficial owners are based. So, but I would just stress, so there isn't just one answer to this question, but we would always use jurisdictions where there's a good reputation. I just re-emphasize the point I made earlier, which is there are a lot of places you can use, but you have to be very, very certain about the legal system, the stability of government. Otherwise, you're causing yourself a huge potential future problem. Okay, so we haven't any other questions on this section, so I'll move on to our final section, which is really with my future-looking hat on. I really wanted to talk about what are the key elements for a successful provider of services to high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals going forward? What kind of things does the successful organisation need to provide to really cater for client needs? You don't just have to know your client, okay? That is one thing. You need to genuinely understand your client. And I make no apologies for reiterating this point. A sophisticated understanding of a client is critical, because unless you understand your client, you will never be able to provide services which are actually responding to genuine client needs. So any person or company which is going to succeed in this industry going forward has to have very sophisticated client understanding. That is the basis for all the other services. And I think we're moving to a new kind of client relationships, and that relationship is based on listening and acting as a kind of consultant for your client. I used to run a global sales team across loads of locations. I used to say to my young guys, if you don't spend 50% or more of your time talking to your clients, you'll be rubbish. Or sorry, listening to your clients, you'll be rubbish. Because most people spend their time talking, and what they're saying could be totally irrelevant to what the client's interested in. The clients switch off after 2 minutes and even fall asleep. So you have to listen to your clients and understand your clients and create a different type of relationship. So if you do not, I used to say to my guys, if you don't understand what your client's hardest problem is, you can never add value. So we're moving to a new paradigm, I think, in terms of the quality of relationships, the types of relationships needed. Now, sometimes our clients and wealthy clients as a whole have a big problem because they need a lot of services, and I went through earlier examples of all the services that they require, but they find it very, very hard to go to 10 different places to get those services. So I think a significant issue for the wealthy is simplicity. They don't want to have multiple service providers. They want to have a fairly seamless mode of service delivery. And this slide from Capgemini and RBS proves that point. 52.5% of high net worth clients prefer to work with a single firm to manage all their financial needs. And I go beyond that. I wouldn't just say financial needs. I talked about philanthropy, property, all those kind of other things that clients need. It's basically solving every issue a demanding client has in their complex life. It's about creating a simple life for them that they don't need to worry. There's one person they can go to, everything gets sorted, from financial needs to property to getting kids into school, etc. So we see increasing demand for a one-stop shop approach, okay, where all services are provided in one place, utilizing a seamless integrated approach. Obviously, sometimes there are very, very specialist parts of those services where a company would need to get some external advice, specialist legal advice and trust advice, etc. But fundamentally, my view is going forward, the people that will succeed in this industry can provide a one-stop shop for client needs. As I say, it's about making people's lives simple. Now, I did have one final thought, which I think is quite interesting. In 1989, just over 40% of the UK's richest people have made their fortune themselves. That number has now been transformed. So in 2013, 80% of people were self-made. And this is according to the Sunday Times Rich List. Most of those people, the newly wealthy, who I think are the biggest target for this industry, tend to be entrepreneurs. They're self-made people. And these numbers are very similar around the world. In fact, they're probably higher in Asia, for instance. That 80% is more like 90% in Asia. But it's a key point because you need to understand the types of clients, and they tend to be highly driven, entrepreneurial type people. And why I think that's important is that you need to actually understand how entrepreneurs work and understand how their mind works. So having a family office which is run by people who are also entrepreneurs who've made their own money can actually be very, very important in terms of developing the right level of understanding. So that's just another thought I wanted to leave you with. But the key learning, I suppose, in terms of the future is you have to have ultra client understanding, a sophisticated client understanding. The relationship has got to be a consultative relationship. Clients prefer a huge range of services to be delivered in an integrated way in one place, and you have to understand. You have to be an entrepreneur to be inside the mind of an entrepreneur. So I think the industry is evolving very, very rapidly, and I think some of the old business models might succeed, but to get to genuinely prosper in this industry as a provider of services, a one-stop shop type approach, which is what a lot of multifamily offices are increasingly doing, is critical. So thank you very, very much for listening. I'll now move on to, I can answer questions on this section and then wider questions. I'm very, very happy to answer anything. So I've got one really good question about the one-stop shop structure. Don't you think that the one-stop shop structure is too complicated? No. In fact, I'll answer in more detail. No, because the whole point about a one-stop shop structure is it actually creates simplicity for clients. They have one product manager, one relationship manager who brings all the products together, who understands all their needs, who can just provide a seamless service. So it's all about simplicity. It's not about complexity. It's hard to manage for the providers, but in terms of what the actual client gets, it creates an infinitely superior service. There's another one actually also on in a similar vein. Using one provider is like putting all your eggs into one basket. What if something would happen with the MFO? I don't think that's really true, because within an organization like Oracle, we've got 100 professionals, so with a very, very wide range of skills. So maybe one or two people might leave the firm at some stage, but basically you've got a whole diverse range of people in one place who can provide you with a great service. It's not putting all your eggs into one basket. You're just basically tapping into a huge level of expertise, which happens to be in one place, where your service can be better. All right, so the next question is where do I see the wealth industry in 10 years? Will there be a lot of small family offices, or will there be a couple of large multi-family offices? I think there will still be quite a few small family offices, particularly managing older wealth, of people who have already set up structures, understanding exactly what is needed. But I think the main trend will be a proliferation in multifamily offices, really, which reflects the growing wealthy in the world. We see, when I started my career, it was quite interesting that it was all about capital being formed in the likes of North America and Europe and the UK, financing the rest of the world. Now, all the emerging wealth is coming from places like Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and it tends to be generated by entrepreneurs who are self-made men. And those are exactly the kind of clients that need the services of a multifamily office providing a one-stop shop. So I think we'll see more and more multifamily offices growing in the business. And yeah, one really important point I think is worthwhile making is, in terms of efficiency, if you have a huge resource in one place, the more families can use that resource, the cheaper it is for all the other families overall. You get economies of scale within a multi-family office, which you don't get within a single family office. Okay. Okay, well look, I don't think we have any more questions, so can I just say thank you very, very much for listening. It's been a pleasure to be a guinea pig for this new concept, certainly for Oracle Capital Group. Please feel free to send us any questions, and I'm very happy I'm very happy to answer any questions by email which we haven't picked up today, and contact me or any of my colleagues at any time. We're delighted to help. We do think the world's changing. We're very confident that we're in a good position from the services we provide. There are a lot of excellent service providers in the industry. I think we all need to take some lessons from today, which is the world is changing quite rapidly, and we all need to adapt. Otherwise, we're going to be out of business, right? And that's a very, very serious thought to leave you with. So, thanks again. As I say, I'll be delighted to talk to any of you online or offline, and we'll answer any questions which come to you over the next few days. And we're delighted you've been the first audience for something which we hope to continue doing on a regular